Alright guys, and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make World of Warcraft look like Guild Wars 2. Now this video will work perfectly well for Classic WoW or Retail because the add-on works for both clients. I made a video a few months back basically telling you how to totally remaster World of Warcraft with add-ons and with little settings like that, but what I didn't do in that video was go in depth on how to set up this interface overhaul add-on Guild Wars 2 UI. You can very easily find this add-on on Twitch. You just type in Guild Wars 2 UI and you're bound to find it. If not, I'll have a link in the description. But what it does require is a little bit of faffing around, to be honest, in order for you to get it perfect, in my opinion, because all of the default settings just are a little bit skew-whiff, in my opinion, and I think a little bit of tweaking and a little bit of turning off certain modules of the add-on will make the interface look a lot better. I mean, this is what mine looks like. So if you want it to look exactly like mine, very minimalist, very sleek, and the screen isn't covered with miscellaneous nonsense that you don't need to see, it's not cluttered or anything like that, you will need to mess around with the settings a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a totally new character with a fresh installment of Guild Wars 2 UI, and basically tell you how I set it up and how I get it to look like this. If you end up liking the video, guys, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel because that really does help out. But anyway, let's jump in. So let's make a totally new character, call it Guild Wars UI video, very original name, and log in. So when you log in, everything's going to be a little bit overwhelming and a little bit like this. First of all, you want to do is disable any other add-ons that will get in the way because we want to focus on Guild Wars 2 UI for the moment. You want to turn Pixel Perfect Mode on, which turns it into this, and automatically scale it to your monitor, which we will probably end up changing later, and then you just press close. First thing I'd recommend to do is totally disable all of your add-ons, but only enable Guild Wars 2 UI, as you can see here. Set up Guild Wars 2 UI and then start introducing new add-ons once you've got Guild Wars 2 UI set up, and press reload UI. And then all I've got is Guild Wars 2 UI. So let's focus on setting up this first. And once you've done that, this is what the interface should look like. And in all honesty, you could just do that and totally live with this interface as it is, because it is quite a nice interface. What I'm going to further talk about moving on in the video is certain modules that I prefer to disable because I normally run into some issues, and there's some modules that I simply do not like. But overall, it is actually quite a nice add-on. First thing you probably want to do is move the target frame and the target of target frame. You very simply do that in the settings. Go to Move HUD, and you move the target down to here, and then the target of target roughly around here. And then what you want to do is press the lock HUD button, because you have to do that before a lot of these settings actually work. So you press the lock button and normally it does a little bit of a quick reload, and now it is obviously the target frame is in a much better place. Issue here though, once you move this, is the way that buffs and debuffs display, because sometimes they start overlapping and it gets very frustrating. Just moving over to my main character to show this step, because I don't actually have any buffs on that character, but I do have buffs on this character. By default, the buffs and the debuffs are down here where you want your target frame. So your buffs and debuffs start overlapping with your target's buffs and debuffs. So what I do is I move them up here with the Move HUD feature, and basically to where they are on a default vanilla UI. You can move them to maybe around here if you prefer them down there, but I just prefer them like where they normally are. And what you want to do is press player buff growth direction to down rather than up, because that'll end up being really weird. So that's the first thing I do. Then you press lock, and then Bob's your uncle, it should be totally normal, and then you can start altering the target buff. So as you can see, target buffs are here, and then the setting, you want to select buffs on top so that the buffs grow upwards rather than downwards, because then I'll start overlapping your action bars here, and then you obviously put debuffs on too. and then the debuffs will display a little bit higher. So there are some elements of the add-on which I would recommend disabling because I have some issues with it. First of all, the character pane. As much as I do like the character pane because it's very trendy, it looks very nice, and the reputation screen is also very nice, the issue with it is it does not show precise stat information with my classic character stats add-on, which I have enabled. So I would recommend disabling it if you obviously want that information. If you want to disable a module, or any of the modules, you come to the modules pane here, and you can basically disable anything, and once you've done that, you just press the save and reload button again, and now I should just have the default interface. And as you can see, with my add-on that tells me hit chance, crit chance, and everything like that, which I do basically prefer. Maybe I could go back to the, what Guild Wars 2 UI has when I don't really, need to know that information, but I always prefer the old school one anyway. The next thing I don't like is the inventory module. I've had some issues with it. The clean bag function doesn't really work as well, and I always just basically prefer Bagnon. So I'm going to enable Bagnon, and then I'm going to show you how to get rid of this module. So again, you just come to this panel here, disable the inventory one, but then you have a bit of an issue because now everything's gone back to normal. I have my Bagnon add-on, how I like it, but as you can see, the bag frame is overlapping on the minimap, so that's a bit of an issue. So now you have to go back and disable the minimap to the default minimap. So there, just disable that, save and reload, and now that issue is fixed and we've got a default minimap. Although I don't know why that's overlapping. That isn't on my main character. I might have to look into that. It might fix with a relog or something. So now I can have that how I want it. I do prefer Bagnon. And the last thing that I disable is the raid frames, because I think that the default raid frames are absolutely perfect. I don't really like any add-on raid frames, to be honest, that I've ever experienced in any interface add-on at all. So I'm going to also disable the party frames and raid frames. Those are just here, so group frames, raid frames, and I'll disable that because I think the default frames are absolutely perfect and you cannot fault them. And that's pretty much it, guys. There won't be that much difference between this interface on this character than my main character. So let's log into the main character and I'll show you how there isn't much difference, and that is basically how I have all my settings set up. Although the last thing I'd recommend disabling is the chat box module, because I also don't really like it, because as you can see, if your mouse isn't hovering over it, it disappears. And I like to have a look at the chat when it's, when I'm like out in open world doing stuff. I like to see if any groups are going and stuff like that, but it fades away so you can't see that, so I have to constantly check it. I prefer to just disable it. I think the default chat box, if you tweak it a little bit, it's perfectly fine on its own. Another thing I will quickly mention is this yellow bar here is your maneuverability cooldown for different classes. So for a warrior it's the charge cooldown, and for a rogue it'd be a sprint cooldown, so that's pretty cool. So now we're back on my main, and as you can see there's not much difference between them, and I can see the chat box clearly, which I do prefer, and everything is just basically how it should be. Last thing to mention is you can have extra action bars appearing here and here where the target frame is, although I prefer not to have action bars here. You cannot unfortunately move the action bars, which is very frustrating, and when you enable Bartender with this add-on it just totally breaks everything, so I'd not recommend doing that. So I'd recommend putting macros and stuff that you don't necessarily have to see on these bars here, because you can make them fade. I will show you in the settings here. If you go to action bars, you can make sure that it only displays on a mouse over. Again, you just keep less clutter on the screen, and that's how I much prefer it, to be honest. And I don't need to see the cooldown of sprint because I can see it here with this yellow bar here. You may be wondering what this add-on is here. This is actually just Titan Panel. What you can do is you can right click it, go to configuration, go to transparency, and you can just take down the transparency, because I don't really see the need to have a bar at the top of your screen. It kind of just gets in the way and I don't like it, and I much prefer having it at the top rather than the bottom, because if you have Titan Panel on the bottom it's going to interfere with your reputation bar from Guild Wars UI, which is a really nice addition. and I don't want to mess around with that because I like it, so that's why I put it at the top. Take the transparency down so it, because obviously it kind of overlaps with the Guild Wars 2 UI here, overlaps in the minimap, doesn't look too nice. Just take it down to 0 and it looks absolutely perfect. Track my durability, my performance, gold, and my ammo and stuff like that, so that's pretty cool. And that's where I'm going to end the video there, guys. My name is Metagoblin. Until my next video, ciao.